If you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Should we call the roll of the town board members?
Here.
McManus.
Can't hear you.
Oh, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, Lenny McManus.
Oh,
Well, we still can hear you.
It's not working.
Get a little closer.
Here.
Chris Barsha.
Here.
Denise Schmuckel.
Here.
Steve Buell.
Here.
Molly Gosnelli.
Here.
And Chuck Hall.
Here.
And if you could do the same for the planning commission?
Sure. Pat Klein.
Here.
Joe Robertson.
Here.
Bob Fudge.
Here.
Joe McManus.
Here.
And Molly Gosnelli.
Here.
Still here.
Again, absent and excused are John Hussein and Chris Good.
Right, the first item on our agenda is public comment. All right, we have no public comment. We will come back to the board for review and approval of the agenda, statements of conflict of interest.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Support. We have motion and support. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
This next one's a planning commission item.
Yes,
So,
sir.
Planning commissioners, in front of you, you have our March 13th minutes. In your packet, any corrections, comments, or questions about those minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve those.
I'll make the motion.
Motion made and supported to approve the March 13th planning commission minutes. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Moving on to business.
Yes, sir.
Item 4. Item A, PD 2024-21, review of the master plan final draft. Have anything you wanted to say, John?
Good evening. I'll be brief, as much as I can. It's up to you guys. But I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to have us kind of go over the draft plan with both the Planning Commission and the board. But I also want to just take a second to recap where we've been. This has been about a journey over the last 2 years. It was actually on February 23rd of 2022 when both the Township Board and the Planning Commission got together and were talking about different issues, and one of those things was the updating the master plan. And in March, the following month, the Planning Commission issued a notice of intent to update the master plan. In 2022 was an effort by the Planning Commission to really gather data and information about Garfield Township. There was some public input opportunities. Probably the big one was the community survey, which was instrumental in really providing a lot of guidance for the development of the master plan. So I thought that went very well. In 2023, about a year ago, we had a joint meeting between the town board and Planning Commission and kind of went over some of that data and findings from all that public input. And that's then when the Planning Commission actually started development of the master plan. And the draft master plan, which you have available to you right now, is one that is, well, it's more than just an update. It's actually, in essence, kind of a rewrite of the current master plan in a lot of respects. There's a lot of things that were carried forward, but there's a lot of new components to it as well. So it's basically, it's a vision for the future for Garfield Township in terms of future land use designations, talks about road connections, housing priorities, environmental protection, infrastructure, economic development, public safety, and other priorities. One of the things in, Steve, if you want to go to our PowerPoint, But I just wanted to say that one of the actions that's needed tonight, should it be considered by the Township Board, is that if going forward would be a distribution of the draft plan that's required by state law and to go to neighboring communities and other agencies. That does require an action and motion and action by the board to approve that before it's distributed. The kind of the structure of the master plan really builds on this Township Board strategic plan. So if you look at the table of contents, there's different goals and objective areas, and those subject areas, those topic areas like natural resources, parks and trails, housing, and so forth, really are just building off of the goals that were in the strategic plan. So it's really where the town board set the overall direction of the township in terms of its organization and the community as a whole. The master plan is helping support that strategic plan and advance those, at least in those particular areas that were appropriate for the master plan. The update is, there's kind of some key pieces that I wanted to talk to you about that are in the master plan and point those out are really going to be instrumental to support the zoning ordinance. So this has all the future land use goals and objectives, has the future land use plan map. All these are required by law to support the zoning in the township. But more importantly, it's really the zoning as a tool that advances a lot of the priorities that are in the master plan. The master plan map you'll see is different. There are a couple key pieces of new designations that we've put in here, and one of them is called a mixed-use neighborhood, and one of them is called a mixed-use center. These are areas that are within the township that are primarily commercial in nature, that are really afford better opportunity to allow for a greater mix of uses. We're not seeing a lot of the traditional retail development in our township. We're still seeing the retail being very active and very, very strong, but you're not getting essentially, like, let's say, some of the big boxes coming in, building new construction. What you are seeing is that they are filling in, so Bed Bath & Beyond is closed. That's available. That will fill in, but we're not seeing actually new construction of those retail spaces. So we are seeing other types of commercial operations coming in. We're seeing some smaller scale retail. We're seeing a lot of drive-through businesses. We're seeing some entertainment uses coming into the area that are filling in some of these areas. So it's important for us to be flexible in how those areas are developed. The Cherryland Center, for example, we know that once that kind of where Yonkers, Sears, and Kmart went out, we're not going to see big boxes filling in there, other big boxes. We'll see some. We've seen that there typically are the discount retailers will go in. So Big Lots went into the old Tom's grocery store market, but we knew that that whole Cherryland Center was not going to fill into retail. But we are seeing some other uses going there. The K1 karting was approved for that. We have the curling center going in there. The TC Philharmonic is going into that same curling center area. So what we wanted to do is provide for that flexibility. Same thing with the Grand Traverse Mall, which is another mixed-use area. We know that's been primarily a retail area, but we wanted to make sure that it's recognized that it is flexible in terms of how that is going forward, in terms of there could be opportunity for residential uses, other entertainment uses, and so forth. So what we've done is on that future land use map, by designating those two mixed-use classifications, they're of a varying degree, and they're very specific to those places in the township. They're kind of unique areas. The neighborhood is a smaller node of areas, a smaller concentrated area, where the mixed-use center is the larger one. And Steve, if you could go to the changes map. So we added a couple of maps on your desk. And this one might be the easiest to work from, at least so that we can point out some of the differences. On your desk is the 2018 future land use map, and then there's this one that's kind of, the one on your table, on your desk doesn't have the aerial photo, but it does have all those highlighted parcels that are in the different colors. And what we're just showing here is the areas that are different, that are making some changes. When we look at the purple ones, there's some purple areas in here. There's some lighter purple, and then there's some darker purple areas. The lighter purple areas, those are the mixed-use neighborhoods. So those are areas where we wanted to allow for things that could be office space areas. They could be multifamily areas in there. In some cases, they may allow some amount of commercial, but it really kind of depends on the area. The darker purple areas are the mixed-use centers. So those are the bigger areas like your Grand Traverse Mall, the Crossings, the Cherryland Center. Those are going to be more intensive in terms of the use and the activity. Might have some drive-through restaurants in those areas, that type of thing. So that was one of the kind of key pieces in here, is the mixed-use center, mixed-use neighborhood. One of the things we did is we recognized that there was a professional office classification. We recognize that there's not a lot of people building office space like there used to be. So that was kind of incorporated into those mixed-use areas. For instance, when we look at the west front area over there by Olson's and Munson Medical Center, that's a mixed-use neighborhood, which is primarily office, but it does have the Olson's Market and some restaurants there. And it's one that we wanted to allow some greater flexibility in that area. Another office area is this corridor right outside of the Township Hall in terms of veterans. We put that, there are some professional office designations in there. We just kind of put those right into the mixed-use neighborhood area to allow some flexibility. This allows, so when the Planning Commission gets a proposal for some development in these areas, it gives some flexibility on how that can go in and how it might be applied in those areas. Another one is kind of call it the base of McCrae Hill, which is where just to the south of South Airport. That's another kind of, it's a mixed-use neighborhood. We wanted to accommodate some of the existing offices that are in there and potentially allow for some other uses, but stuff that's going to fit in with that particular area. Another category we changed was institutional. It recognized some things like some schools, but didn't recognize a lot of the other public assets throughout our community. So places that are, properties might be owned by Grand Traverse County, the Road Commission, Beta. We have all the utilities, so we have consumers. So if you look at that big blue area, that's kind of at the southeast corner of the township, that's the that land that's owned by consumers, expected in the future to probably be maintained as important corridors for transmission and so forth. And the likelihood of that being other uses is probably not so much. So we wanted to recognize those areas where we thought that these are either public or semi-public. So they could be things, for instance, like the Christian school there, that's recognized as a semi-public type of operation there. Probably another big change was some of the low-density residential. So that's our yellow areas. When we look at the northwest part of the township, that was traditionally identified as agricultural or rural land, and which included agricultural operations and also some large lot residential. With the extension of the water main through that area and availability of sewer nearby, it was thought that those farming and agricultural operations can continue, but this does afford an opportunity for some low-density residential. In this case, low density is 1 to 3 units an acre. So you could still have some of those small farm operations there. You could have still the one lot and greater, but if somebody did want to develop, say, a subdivision in that area, they have water, sewer nearby to potentially increase add a little bit density. We thought that this area would make a lot of sense. Also, one of the things that we were recognizing is over across the border on Gray Road on the west side in Long Lake Township at M72. If you go out there right now, you'll see some apartments being developed out in that area. We didn't want to go to that density, but we recognize that it does kind of change things in terms of what's the pattern of land use that might best fit in this area. Have any questions so far?
I think, John, the one thing we talked a lot about when we made changes in two key areas, when you look at the northwest corner of the township and you look at the kind of the southwest corner of the township, we recommended changing a lot of that agricultural land to residential, as John just said. But one of the things that we had to look at was what I call it the pressure, the impact from our neighboring townships. You look at what Long Lake's doing up there on the other side of Gray Road, tremendous amount of housing, and actually a commercial piece right on the corner. So as we look at what's compatible, we always look within our own fishbowl and say, are we compatible with developments that are on opposite sides of the road within our township? Well, we need to look at opposite sides of the roads in other townships as well. And you look at our three sides, you look at the pressure from Long Lake, look what's happening on Rennie School Road, Blair Township, over the last 5 years, and you look at what East Bay's doing on the old Elmbrook Golf Course property. All three of those areas were really rural agricultural projections for us. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense if we stay that course when we have agriculture on one side of the road and you got industrial on the other side of the road in neighboring township. So some of these changes are influenced by the pressures from outside our township too, to make them, so we can transition into those other uses. So, thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Another area that we kind of added in a little bit was some of the moderate density. That's kind of the pale orange areas, and some of those are just recognizing, like for instance, where Steve's highlighting there at the end of Zimmerman, there's water and sewer right there. There's opportunity to develop there, probably at a density higher than 1 to 3 acres, 3 units per acre, but more of maybe 3 to 6 units an acre. So these are areas that we thought where they're kind of higher density. They have the services to go a little bit higher density. They also work as areas of transition, so they might be abutting some commercial areas and allowing for that little bit of a higher density. And then I guess probably the last thing is we just did some hickory forest in some of the park areas. We just recognized those newer areas as parkland or recreation conservation areas throughout the map. Any other comments or questions on the future land use map and some of the changes?
John, one on the, is that Morgan Farms, the high density, the orange, where they're building right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's in a PUD. There's really only one building that's going in there. That's part of that Morgan Farms PUD. So,
Thank you.
one of the things we're going to be doing with the ordinance is amending some of our districts. And we'll be keeping a lot of the zoning districts that we have right now, but we will be working with the Planning Commission and making some changes. For instance, the planned shopping center district will probably morph into something that will accommodate that mixed-use center. It's already kind of a mixed-use district, but we want to make sure it works for the benefit of really enticing a variety of development, particularly in some of those areas like the Grand Traverse Mall and the Cherryland Center. We'll also be looking at ways to streamline any of our review processes to ensure consistency. A big part of this master plan is it does provide certain development principles, particularly in those mixed-use areas, that will give guidance to the Planning Commission and the Township Board when you make decisions. We want to make sure that as we go through these processes, that there is some consistency in how those developments are reviewed by both the Planning Commission, Township Board, but as well as staff as well. Because there are a lot of reviews that we do administratively. One of the things that we're looking at is the idea of doing some of those by right reviews actually by the planning department. Those right now are done through the zoning administrator, but we feel to have some consistency in that will probably require us to ensure that the conformance with the master plan and some of those development principles are applied. So it does give us the opportunity to evaluate and how we can best work with developers and property owners in terms of streamlining those processes. The other thing that we have in our master plan that is kind of new is the Planning Enabling Act talks about a master street plan, and not a lot of communities do this, but we felt that because of the way our township is developing, that there needs to be some additional connections throughout the community. So Steve, if you want to show that map, this is in your in the master plan, but it's just basically the idea of where there could potentially be some future connections throughout the township. And there's some ones, and these aren't necessarily new roads that are done, let's say, with the road commission, but these could also be private roads. We have in there, for instance, the one that we've been trying to work to is that Lowe's to Grand Traverse Mall connection. That's highlighted in there. We have, though, like the extension of Zimmerman up to Harris, but so it could be a county road extension. It could be private roads that we're working with developers to allow people to have greater connections in the area. So this is something that we're excited to see. It's really hard to just do development in terms of land use development without recognizing the relationship with the transportation, particularly our roads and streets throughout the community. So as part of the review process, this will be sent to the Road Commission. It'll also be sent to the North Region of the Michigan Department of Transportation, so they'll be able to see what some of our priorities are. It's not to say that we're doing these roads or whatever, but it's just saying that we would like to see some of these connections. It's often challenging in an area that's growing in not making some of those additional connections throughout our community. We also want to keep this in mind when we're looking at some of our existing corridors. So are there things that we can do along South Airport Road, particularly that portion from, say, Logan's Landing to Garfield Road? If there are ways that we can get shared driveways in there when we do land developments, in reviewing those, are there ways that we can work with our road agencies a little bit better on developments? One project that was worked out fairly well was when the new Shell gas station went in at the southeast corner of Lafreniere and South Airport Road. Is we worked with the developer and the road commission to close a couple of those driveways so that they're a little bit wider, but they're more farther away from that intersection, provides for better flow in and out of that site, makes it safer for the people that are going in and out of there. So I certainly think the collaboration of working with the Road Commission and MDOT is going to continue to be important. What the master plan here just kind of provides us with some of our priorities and what we'd like to see, some of the things that are happening in our community related to transportation. Just want to follow up on the last part is really just what are the next steps. So the joint meeting today really affords an opportunity for both the town board and planning commission to have some final thoughts before this goes through a 63-day review process, which is required by state law. That distribution, like I mentioned, goes to some of our neighboring communities, so the surrounding townships, the city. It has to go out to utility companies like Cherryland Electric, consumers, and so forth. It'll go to the railroad. It has to go to the county. That gives them opportunity to provide some feedback to the township. We thought there might be an opportunity to have some more public engagement. We could easily do that. Nothing really fancy, but just let people know that we're still going through this review process and are open for any comments that they have on it. That review process would end at roughly at about the end of May. It'll come back to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is required by law to hold a public hearing and then would make a recommendation for the adoption of the master plan to the town board, and then the town board would have that final approval on That's all I have. I'm just open for any comments or questions or anything you might have.
You know, we sat back a couple of meetings ago and we talked about, not the last time we met, but the time before that, and there was one thing that came out of that meeting was, and I hate to use the term affordable, but affordable housing. What can we do to try to help that? And you know, it was 2022 probably. We're in the second year of COVID, and the housing market went crazy, and it hasn't come down yet. The two things that we did spend a lot of time on and do, probably more than that, and John could correct me, but you know, some things we've done to try to, you can only try to help promote and make things available, and whether you're successful, only time will tell. But a couple things we've done is a couple of land use changes, made more, you know, more property available for development and housing, first of all. In things like square footage for lots, we reduce square footage, lot sizes in some of the zoning districts to try to make lots more affordable. That came to you a while ago, I believe, to the town board for approval. And then allowing residential developments in some of the commercial areas, like we just approved last week over on Garfield Avenue, where, you know, so, you know, we have, you know, we didn't forget about that conversation 2 years ago, and only time will tell if we're really successful in what we tried to do, but that is all part of what's encompassed in here too, so.
John, one question I noticed, and I've always seen this piece, and it just made me ask the question. The corner of Secor and West Silver Lake was always zoned future master plan commercial. And then you have the Francisco's, Gilroy's up there. I see that was changed to mixed-use neighborhood. But then I noticed on the future master plan, we took that commercial zoning away there and went to, what is it, low-density residential.
At Secor.
Seacorn, West Silver Lake. That one right there. Yep, the purplish colored one.
That piece is zoned commercial.
On the
But it might
ground,
as well
it's
stay
commercial.
on the,
Yeah, it may as well stay that way on the master plan, but it's zoned commercial, right?
Well, it's zoned commercial, but I guess if future land use could, I mean, certainly they can develop per the zoning, but I don't, what is the existing map? Can you show me the
Existing.
2018 map?
Oh, the 2018.
Existing's red. Well, excuse me, the
Okay.
future is red. I don't know what current zoning is. Maybe I missed.
No, the zoning is local commercial.
The zoning's local commercial.
So I guess if you want to continue and make that allow, I mean, it's permitted right now under the zoning, so somebody there could put a store there. But I guess what we're looking at, the future land use, do we really want that to be an area of commercial, I guess is what we were looking at. That doesn't necessarily have to conform with what's in the current zoning.
Okay. I didn't realize that the current zoning was commercial. I thought
Yeah.
it was something different. Okay. And that is what it is, right? That is not changed.
No, the zoning stays the same. Well, this is just the future land use designation.
Future,
If you would like
we
the future
hope.
land use designation to be commercial, we could do that. We thought probably in the long term, knowing that area, you know, you have the Green Hill area kind of up to, just to the north of there, thought that that's really kind of the commercial node for that area. There isn't any established commercial businesses that right there currently, so.
I don't have a problem with it. I mean, the owners can leave the zoning as it is, and if they sell it, the new owners could leave the zoning as it is or change
Right.
it.
well, one thing about that, there's a future talk about a circle there, a traffic circle. They're not doing study, or they're kind of studying, but anyway, if they take that, they'll take that property. So at that point, if it's not master planned, if it's master planned for that to be, what do we call it, a neighborhood commercial, is that gonna make a difference then? So, because they're gonna probably take some of that away, but if they put their leg in there for that commercial easement right then, or in their circle, they
Right,
could
for
put
the,
their the
Yeah.
driveway for it or something.
Right. So it doesn't change the zoning on that. That roundabout project doesn't change the zoning. The future land use map doesn't change that zoning on there. The zoning stays. It's always runs with the land unless somebody were to petition the township to change that zoning.
One thought is though, if it stays, if you keep it red, that green next to it might need to, if they take too much of their property to make the circle, then you might need to make it a little bigger. And if it was shown on the future master plan as being there, it would help at that point maybe.
Well, I guess the question in an ideal world is does the township envision commercial development in that area? I guess that's kind of the question in the future. I mean, if there is, then that's fine, you can put that in the future land use map, but I guess it just seemed like it was there's no commercial development. It's not to say, it's not changing the zoning, but I'm just saying that
Yeah, but like.
in the future, what would that ideally, would that be a commercial node or not, I guess is what we're just, I guess is the question.
Kind of the flip side of what we're doing up in the northwest, we're saying, hey, there's an agricultural operation up there. They can stay agricultural forever, but in the future, we might allow housing. It's kind of the flip side of that. It's commercial now, it can stay commercial. It's gonna stay commercial until somebody were to come in and petition to change it. We
Right.
can't just change zoning on it. So
No, I mean, the future master plan is Garfield Township's wish list of development methods.
In Silver Lake, right?
It's what we're hoping will happen.
Yeah, it's our vision for the
It's
future.
our vision of
Correct. Yep,
development.
doesn't change the zoning
But it
at all.
doesn't change what they have.
Nope.
But we have had, when I was on the planning commission, we did have people come in and revert. There was somebody on Hammond that reverted, what was it, from commercial or
Commercial,
industrial
they
to
put land-
ag or something? Remember, they changed that property and basically downgraded it to, I think it was ag or something.
They said
Right,
it was
they
a
wanna make it nature
conservation.
preserve area.
Yeah, which was kind of interesting, but yeah, and it worked.
Yeah, they actually put a conditional rezoning on that, reverting it from commercial back to nature and preservation or something.
Yeah, there was ponds and stuff back in there or something.
Yeah, we thought at first they were kidding.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought, who would ask for that? But they did, and they wanted it to be a wildlife area, kind
They're
of.
very nice, sincere people.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, we had the same thing, well, not the same thing, but the Gothier property was commercial and downgraded to residential. Because of concerns with traffic, they thought a better use for it was residential. I think you guys may have seen a presentation on that last night. But that was zoned, it was zoned half commercial and half residential, that piece was. So we split the difference and made it medium density or high density residential to kind of appease them, and that got it off the commercial rolls.
Yep.
And that was an actual petition from them, and we changed that zoning. So,
If you prefer, we can redesignate that or maintain that designation as commercial.
is it, in the existing land use map, it's identified as, the existing would be probably agricultural or rural, but it's in the zoning, it's still zoned commercial. How big is that piece, acres-wise, Steve?
It is.
It's part of across the road, but it's probably about 3 acres.
Is it zoned separately, or is it just all part of that same
It's
piece?
all part of the.
Oh, I got you.
It's all together.
Oh, the parcel is all together, yeah.
So that's kind of odd too, isn't it? That
Yeah,
You could measure that.
we can just measure it real quick.
I thought there might be a separate tax number for that small piece, but apparently not. That's handy.
Yeah, that's
About 6 acres.
I don't know, 6 acres. So even if they put a roundabout out there, there might be enough still for somebody to put a commercial use.
Yeah, you don't
there.
need much land for commercial. I mean, I guess you could extend sewer down that area, I suppose, from the crown, similar to where it was extended north to, but there is no services over there, either water, sewer, or anything like that.
well, the water and sewer both go to that 40 right to the west of it. They're into that property line. Right there where your arrow is. That's serviced by water and sewer. That 40 that you just touched. So it's one property away.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying it would have to be extended to the property, that's all I was saying.
I don't, personally, I don't see a need to change it from what you're recommending, John, because they, the current owners have commercial zoning, and if they wanted to sell it as commercial zoning, it would transfer over to the new owners, but yet, if anybody wanted to go to, I gotta learn these new colors, low density, then they basically have an easy route to do it.
So I got one question on, when you mentioned railroad, you were gonna give this to the railroad. Are we all set if they ever give the railroad easement that's on the west side of the river up, that we can make that into a trail? Are we indicating, or do we need to do anything on our future land use for that?
I don't think we need to do it on the future land use. It's probably going to be in some public domain, whether it's still maintained by MDOT or some other probably public entity. I don't think it would no longer be. But I thought we
We talked about it in like the non-motorized plan,
Okay,
or the street
okay.
plan part of it, yeah.
Yeah,
So
to
we're
move
set up?
that,
Okay.
yeah, so that it would be converted over to a trail.
Okay.
That's what we would mention that. That's something that I think we're fairly supportive of.
But if the railroad wanted to give up that property and they decided to do it another way and split to the property owners on both sides, how would that affect this is just a we just have a suggestion here that we'd like to see a trail, but they
Right.
can really do whatever they want.
True. I mean, it could be similar to a road vacation where you just split the property in half if MDOT does that. But yeah, it would be our vision and hope that that could
Yeah.
potentially be converted to a trail, rail to trail. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I guess they're going to make that decision on the future. I think part of that operation is not even active right now. I'm not sure how far that goes up in terms of that rail operation, but maybe that will be at some point extended, and I'm not sure all what that means in terms of the viability of that going forward. But it has the potential for some of those businesses along Cass. So there was the recycling business that was using that, but I don't know how really active that area is going to be for rail service or not in the future.
Just in that area, the county at one time looked at changing the rail and only coming in on the other side of Boardman Lake and having Keystone be 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out, a wider road over that rail line. We're talking 40 years ago. 30 years ago, but it's been looked at and, making the change. But at that time, Cherry Growers was using a lot of sugar and they were using that, so never happened, but.
Yeah, it seems to me the rail lines, or at least the railroad rights of way, really afford some great opportunities for this community. For the amount of activity that's on there, it seems like we're really not getting the best that we could for this community. And maybe some of those businesses could be maybe relocated closer to the rail line because they can be disruptive. I mean, just the other day driving down South Airport and the signals are going over on the east side crossing, but there's no train there. And
Happened 3 times today.
yeah, so you could imagine that right away, whether it's for trails or potentially new road connections or whatever, could really benefit the community, because the reality is I don't see a lot of commercial demand for freight rail in our community. Not to say it's not important, but it's just like maybe it could be done a little bit better so it's not disruptive and it becomes an asset for the community, particularly when we're trying to look at connections for roadways and so forth.
I know our neighboring communities would be happy to have it turned into trail.
Oh, yeah.
Lair and Green Lake both.
But if we don't have the east-west connection, they're gonna have to find other connections to hold more traffic also. So the idea of expanding some of those roads, yeah, who knows?
Yeah, that's been talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't it hard to get a railroad crossing? To cross a railroad, don't they only give you so many? And then, I mean, if it's
Yeah.
public domain, it might be a little different, but
Well, if the
Soccer
MDOT
fields.
Rail owns the rail, and it's leased by Great Lakes Central, who's the same company that owns a property downtown that has been sitting there with a hole in the ground for 40 years. So there's a connection,
yeah.
but they're kind of like squatters. They're not doing anything with the property. They just
Hold on.
hang on to it and hope someday it'll be worth something.
Yeah, I mean, I could see if we had bigger manufacturing, like automotive frameworking or something like that up here, they would use those to ship, but really the only cars that come in on rail are the lumber guys that are getting it out at Williamsburg.
Yep.
You know, there's nobody else that's big enough to use rail cars. Our factories aren't set up for that.
It's not a sustainable operation. It will require
Not in Traverse City,
a big subsidy for a long time.
yeah.
There's always that passenger rail. It's been
That would be
talked
that'd be a
about.
larger subsidy.
Ah, it would be. Gotta get to Ann Arbor for those games.
Out in the ground, you can pedal a bike up and down the rails, maybe that's
Yep.
something to do with
All the way down to the Hoosier
Now, if they
Valley.
went to Lansing, I'd support it, but.
Well, is there anything the township could do to petition them to, so that where South Airport, the railroad crossing on the west side, all the gas trucks and the buses that have to stop there and disrupt traffic for hardly ever getting used, if there was any possible way that you could petition them to get that crossing right out of there, it would, it'd be quite a lot different. It'd be a big difference to the road.
I agree. I don't know what the way to do that, although it seems like if collectively as this community, the township and other communities came together, that would be great. But like we're talking about, there's an effort to try to do passenger rail.
Well, that would be on the east side of the river.
Right.
Because that west side don't go anywhere anyway, other than to cherry growers.
It's true.
It
Yeah.
dead ends.
They have to find some way to turn around. That's the key to it. They gotta have a turnaround.
Kingsley, that'd be a great place to turn around.
Well, you could do that. You could do, so this is all a spur off the main line between Ann Arbor and Petoskey. So you could have a transload facility down in Walton Junction down there by Fife Lake where you could say, okay, it's gonna rail in most of the way, but then that last mile or two or several miles could be done by truck or something like that. There's things like that communities do all the time because rail doesn't go to every aspect of the community, but
John, when you submit these to the municipalities and the railroad, do you submit hard copies with cover letters, or do you email? And the reason I'm asking is, like with the railroad, if we submitted it to them, and then in the cover letter, hit the highlight of, please look at this section, because if you ever left your railroads or abandoned them, our township and a lot of other recreational authorities would be interested in converting it to trail network. So please keep that in mind, should that thought process be there. Maybe provoke their thought versus just giving them the plan and they gotta find that section. Maybe.
Maybe. It's a bureaucracy. Bureaucracies do not like to shrink.
But I mean, at some point, they abandoned the Traverse City to Sutton's Bay one, and that became a really cool, rail to trail, and it's used a horde. They really, I mean, the western leg going out to Grawn is, they'd have to tree trim a lot and replace a lot of stuff, because now everything's getting pushed around by pine trees and trees that are growing in the rails.
Yeah, and it just dead ends after
Yeah.
that. There's nothing. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm just thinking of if you hung that little invitational carrot out there, who knows where it would go, you never know. Versus them having a thought of splitting it back to the landowners, and then if we lose a section in the middle, we're done.
Yeah. I don't think they'll do that. If they do it to trails, they still retain ownership. So that at some point in the future, they can still have their dream of an
Rails.
active rail line there again. I think that's more attractive to them.
So that one going to Sutton's Bay is still owned by the railroad company?
Correct.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
They sold that over there past Cherry Growers, though, because Apple Fence owns that, where they have their big display, and they sold that back to the homeowner, or all the way up through Interlochen, that whole rail got sold, but that's probably rare.
There's so much of it at one time that 90% of the railroads that aren't anymore. Talk to your legislators. Well, I think it's a well-done plan. Colors throw me off every once in a while, but
There's a lot of them.
And I'll just say it, John and Steve have been great through this process. They've kept us on course, us on pace, because we're easily distracted and like to get off in the weeds on things. So they've held our feet to the fire during our study sessions for the most part over the last couple of years and to get this done. And it's a living, breathing document. You're going to see probably, it's kind of like painting the Mackinac Bridge. You get done, and then you're going to start painting again. So we'll probably be visiting this again in the next few years and looking at it. But it's important to keep it updated and keep it changing as the times. So, but thanks to you guys. You did a great job keeping us going. Nice job on the plan itself.
Thank you.
And it's worked well, I think, for us. When people come in and want changes, I'm not hearing a lot of complaints about, oh, well, this is really hard to work with Garfield. They know what we want, they understand it, and it's easy for them, so kudos to you guys.
Thank you. Well, it's all kind of a team effort, I think, but it helps us to be able to basically illustrate and tell them this is what the township wants, and our expectations in terms of the type of development, the quality of development, and so forth, our expectations for things, like cross-access and all that. If we have that all kind of laid out here, they're aware of that, we're kind of holding the bar in terms of what we expect to see happening in our community. And I think most developers, they respond to that positively because it gives them a sense that we are going to maintain this quality of development in our community. And so if they're making significant investments in our community, millions of dollars, that gives them some assurances that there's some protection in terms of value of their investment. So that's what this is. I think, if anything, you can't necessarily quantify that, but I think that's one thing that when we work with developers and property owners looking to do things, this gives them assurance that we're investing in a good quality community. We're not going to put some money into a nice store and then a slaughterhouse goes up right next to it. It's like it gives them some predictability and assurances, and in a world that's kind of often changing, that gives them a good sense, whether it's the banks that are financing them or the money that they're putting in on themselves. So. I don't have anything else, just the one reminder about the distribution action, but other than that, we're good.
Just a quick motion.
We're looking for a motion to distribute the draft plan to our neighboring communities.
Yep. There's a draft motion in our memo there.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the distribution of the draft Charter Township of Garfield Master Plan for the 63-day review period in accordance to the Michigan Planning Enabling Act.
Support.
We have a motion and support. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Other business to come before the Joint Commission.
Next meeting for the April 23rd. I want to make sure we have a quorum for our next board meeting, because it's during the MTA conference.
Oh.
I'm planning on being there.
Me too.
Chris, Laney, we just need to make sure there's a fourth, because we have a public hearing for Culver Meadows.
At 6 o'clock here?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'll be here. Okay.
yeah. My
I-
day's shot, but my evening is still good for here.
Even though that's going on, I still should, I could leave there and be here.
It is, well, during the big
All right,
party.
we're good.
Huh? I don't stay for nighttime stuff, so that's what
There you
I'm
go,
saying.
perfect.
I don't
Okay,
stay
we just
for-
wanted to make sure, because a lot of us are going to the conference, we wanted to make sure we had a quorum. So we have the Brownfield, it's gonna come
Right.
back to us, and then that we have a public hearing that night, so.
Yeah, I
That's
don't
it.
do the nighttime stuff.
All right,
I'll be here.
we have the numbers.
On the next, and we did have, I don't know if we were going, still on that topic, the other discussion after the master plan, and this was, did we have any other topics? We talked about sort of topics for the town board discussion, and was there anything outside of the master plan that we needed to discuss as the board? I'm not sure if there is. I know we threw some
We
ideas.
kind of talk about, a little bit about some of the state exemptions that are happening right now, like the clawbacks from the state on zoning related to, like, we were talking about the solar energy, ones that happened recently. There's also the discussions about short-term rentals and sand and gravel mining operations, which kind of is always a discussion happening, but haven't seen anything recent, but,
I don't know that we'll solve anything tonight, but I just, I guess maybe you're more in the loop than we are. What are you hearing about those? I mean, the short-term rental concerns us, the mining concerns us, are you hearing anything more on those items?
Wind generators.
Yeah, I think we have to worry too much about solar, industrial-sized solar or wind facilities, because we just don't have enough land to do that. Short-term rentals is always going to be a
Hot topic.
and what they've been doing is they're distributing money to the convention and visitors bureaus now, short-term rentals. They're offering that so that the opposition that they had will dissipate. And then they're talking about giving money to the communities for police and fire departments, thinking that, so they think if they just keep throwing money at it, sooner or later they'll get their way. But
It does nothing for our low-income housing or for workforce housing or
Yep.
or anything else.
Absolutely not.
Makes it worse.
Correct.
Harbor Springs that had so many short terms and nobody could afford to live there after a while.
Look at Aspen, look at Breckenridge, look
Yeah,
at
all
all
the
those
ski
places. Yeah,
Places out west are terrible.
Lake Tahoe, all that stuff.
Yeah, we're still against it. I mean, MTA's against it, Michigan Association of Counties is against it. It's and it's kind of short-term thinking, because I think they believe that everybody is going to flip their houses and they're going to make a whole lot of money. But I think what's happening is that there's some big corporations, these hedge funds, that are buying up the property, and they're not going to resell them. They're going to hang on to them for a long time, so it'll kill the real estate business in the end, if they were to think that far ahead.
Don't pick on realtors now.
They're not thinking that far ahead.
No. Well, I mean, we didn't, that was, we didn't want to get strictly on the master plan, or at least the opportunity for, the planning commissioners or the town board to say, is we go in the right direction, we doing the right things, and what concerns do we need to look out for and going forward, I guess.
I have a quick comment.
Yeah.
In all the work that you do, John, I don't know if communities need to worry about making changes to zoning that increases the population significantly where it outpaces the resources. Like, for instance, I've been at Munson like 3 times, not for me, but for other reasons, and you'll sit in their ER for 5-8 hours. So if you change your zoning to allow multifamily apartments, these people get injured, they have to go use our resources, and at what point do we need to be concerned about that at our level? Has that ever come up in conversations you've had with other planners?
You mean because of the development we're allowing to happen, the impact it is on other aspects of our community, such as like emergency services and
Yes.
stuff like that? Yeah, in Michigan, it doesn't, other states have things like impact fees, like Illinois has them. Michigan does not allow for anything like that, does not permit, and I don't expect it anytime soon. But that's what people don't realize is we all subsidize development to some extent. Because when we allow that development, I mean, it does impact our community, impacts our roads and so forth. It has the potential to impact our schools. And the true cost of that development and its impact is really just absorbed by all of us.
Right.
We might have them, they might have to pay for things such as, let's say, extending the water, sewer lines or whatever. But yeah, in terms of what that impact is on the community, it's more significant than just, the water sewer lines.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wondered if that's something that, like, we have an obligation to be cognizant of, because we want people to live here. Oh, come here, but yet we can't take care of these needs in case you get hurt. Or we can't have the fire department come and put your house out because we're too busy running all over the place. I'm just a thought when I was sitting at Munson numerous times thinking about that.
Yeah.
So-
No, that's a really good point, because I don't think people realize that people that are, property owners that are here now are already subsidizing some of that newer development, because that's why if you ever require conditions, legally that you can, or demands of different development, I don't think there's any problem with that, because the value of that property, when there's a vacant parcel and it's on a dirt road, it doesn't really have much value. But now you put a roadway in that, so the community paid for that road, they put in traffic lights, it's a wide road, it's 5-lane roads. Now all of a sudden that property has higher value. That developer goes in there and builds that infrastructure to serve that has all been subsidized by the community, whether it's, water sewer rate payers or people that pay for the county road millage or gas taxes and all that stuff. That infrastructure that created the value of that property ultimately does subsidize that to some degree. So I think it's just something that's not really addressed in Michigan. It does get complicated. I've talked to planners from like Illinois, and it gets very political about impact fees. I'm not saying that's the solution, but it does at least attempt to recognize that when we do have development in our community, it impacts us all. So.
And then one other quick question out of curiosity. When you send the draft plans out to the community stakeholders, what percentage do you actually hear back from that get them? Is it pretty, is it 50%? Is it minimal? Do you hear back from them at all?
Not much, really. I mean, we might hear from some of the adjacent townships. I know our planning commission, when we get other communities' plans, we always respond back with a letter, and we look at their plans, and we commented, like, for instance, Long Lake Township recently did their master plan, and the planning commission here had some comments, but it's not many comments. It's more for just to let them know, FYI, what's happening here in Garfield, and if there's any issues, particularly along the boundaries and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Molly?
To comment on the increase in density, there is the other side of the coin. If you don't have places for people to live, then you don't have manufacturing, you don't have commercial, people can't come here. So our economic base goes, so you got both sides of that. And we've talked about density, and I think both boards have talked about how much density do we want to have? And maybe that's something to revisit, I don't know, but the economic development thing for Garfield Township has always been kind of out there. We keep our taxes low because we do that, but there's a price to pay.
Yeah.
Steve?
John, take away the expensive condo projects that have views of the bays, but do you tend to see the projects be cheaper per unit with the higher density than lower density? I mean, they're not paying for big chunks of land, they're not paying for their own home. I mean, when when they're putting more on an acre. And I mean, we just looked at that thing last night. I didn't think that was cheap rental at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, whoa,
That's where,
Bought eggs late
that's
into-
about my
Yeah.
mortgage price, so.
That's where it's at right now.
You know, and I agree with Maui. I think we have to provide the opportunities for housing, you know, waitresses, you know, people that are cashiers and checkout people and, you know, people that work at Home Depot and, you know, the box stores and that stuff. They got to have a relatively decent place to live, or they're driving in from, you know, way out in Wexford County or something like that. But do you tend to see the higher density pricing be a little cheaper than, you know, a house per acre?
Not necessarily. It actually depends on where you're located within the township, and then also its proximity to the city. So as you kind of get closer into the city, the
Price
values
starts
go
going
up. But it is, I think, you know, I think that's something that when we were looking at the future land use map of the Planning Commission, you know, we want to, I think there is an opportunity to allow for some higher densities in some areas where we do have the water, sewer. There's a lot more road network that people can get in and out of places. I would say, you know, kind of more of our, you know, low-density residential areas, keep those that way. But where we do have, you know, maybe some of our older commercial areas that could be converted to some high-density residential, it does make sense. It's not like there's any magical place on where that can go. It's almost on a case-by-case basis to evaluate it. But higher density, they'll say, is intended to reduce that, you know, whatever that price point is, that chunk rent or whatever that cost is to rent that unit, but we have no control over that. And, you know, we don't have any control of ownership. They could, you know, for instance, like the city where, you know, they converted a rental apartments over into condos. So it's really hard to tell. I think what's important for us is to allow for the development that we think in the long term is going to be of value to the community. So density is fine, but we want to make sure it's a high quality development, has maybe amenities or fits into that particular area. So that's where I think the balance, I think that's, as the Planning Commission looking at projects can kind of assess that to say, you know, we're looking for the quality because at the end of the day, we don't really have a control over what the market does on some of these properties.
Right, okay.
Chloe?
Just thinking about the density and everything and how much development is happening in Garfield, do we ever put on our future land use? I know you have the green for recreational of the existing parks and conservation, but do we ever put what pieces of property we would like to conserve? Because I'd like to balance all this development with conserving a little bit more, because that's what people love about living here in this area. So do we ever have, you know, a plan for pieces of property that are beautiful that we'd maybe want to have as a park or a land of conservation? Do you ever consider that on there?
There was some discussions with the Parks and Rec Commission about that, and there have been from time to time. I think with the focus right now is just to improve the parklands that we have, but I think what you might be alluding to is the potential to maybe have just some preserve areas, which I've seen communities do, and that might, I could see that potentially happening with the township working with other partners, like the Regional Land Conservancy or whatever. If there were some green belt areas, like I know we always talk about, you know, the preservation of McCrae Hill and the view shed and how that's a nice part of our community, and how could that be protected in some degree. I think it could be. I think you could still allow some development kind of behind the trees, so to speak, but if you can keep some of those core properties, kind of keeps that character of Garfield, and that has a potential to happen, but it's going to require, you know, it's not something that I think the township can do on its own. It's going to be, I think, some type of collaborative approach that could be looked at, because otherwise, how can the township really go out there and secure some of these properties without having some other resources and other partners involved? I think it would be a pretty heavy lift. Particularly when we know the value, the land values that we're dealing with. We got some very pricey land that's in our community. It's hard, so.
Yeah, well, like that particular property with the dump in the middle of it, you know, that would have been I mean, it had
To
its.
preserve a dump.
I know, but I wish it didn't have a dump in it, because that would have been great to just conserve or make a park. 'Cause it had beautiful views and,
Fly Ash Park.
yeah, yeah. So, I don't know, I think when we see opportunities, we should take them, not necessarily that one because of the, problems with it. I don't think wanted to take on, but,
And that has been our policy. We picked up a lot of property on the river. We picked up 40 acres from the state up above the commons to add to our recreational area up there. The Joint Rec Authority just picked up Hickory Woods, we're calling it?
Forest.
Forest now, okay. We have a forest. So there's when there's an opportunity, I think we take advantage of it, but I don't want to be taken advantage of. So I probably won't be buying any dumps.
Don't we have
Yeah.
a wetland by Travers Field too?
Yeah. And
To
it's,
the east, or no, excuse me, to the west of Travers Field, between the new storage building things
yep,
in Travers Field, right?
yeah, and it's not a,
Didn't they approach us on that? And I don't remember, it was, I know
the
it was
property owner
next to nothing to get.
donated it, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
He wanted to
Okay.
get it off his tax rolls.
Yeah, 'cause it's
You
basically
can't
small.
build on it, it's wet.
I think when you look at the township, there is a lot of recreational property, and opportunity might be more to develop some of what we have to make it more usable. You think about the Silver Lake Park, it gets a tremendous amount of use. It's what, 40 acres or 50 acres of property, but we've made an investment in use there. We've talked about it. I mean, you look at the township, there's a lot of green on this map, up and down the river, both sides of the township. And when we've done a lot of developments, with these higher density developments, we require amenities within those developments for the people living there. Dog parks, walking trails, picnic areas, outdoor areas, as a trade-off for the higher density. So maybe they're not public, parks, they may or may not be open to the public, but the trail system, you take Chelsea Park, right across on Hartman, all those trails were required to go through those properties and maintained by the developer, but they're open to the public for use. So there's some hidden things that we do out there that aren't necessarily shown on a map as park, but they create opportunities. So, I think there may be some of that out there too that, kind of with Chuck, it's pretty hard to go out and buy 40 or 80 acres to make a park nowadays because, the asking prices are going to be pretty exorbitant. But I think there's things that we are doing and can do. That's the big thing, John. We know we don't let up much on that. And Racine's a real advocate of that. Okay, you want higher density, great, but what are you going to provide us? What amenities are you going to provide the community as a whole to get that density? So,
In 2020 hindsight, I would have bought a lot more property 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have sold anything I had.
that's true.
I would just add, I think if you were interested in actually preserving some lands there are stuff that comes available as opposed to kind of just responding to what I think you would almost have to prioritize. What are some of those really parts of our community that we would be devastated if it was, turned into, parking lots and stuff like that? And really kind of maybe focus on those areas would probably be the way to approach that. So if those areas are really important, then there may be a way to generate some collaboration to, tap into some resources to, acquire those properties. And I think we're fortunate when we have some of our property owners like Olson's and so forth that have really kind of left some kind of areas natural, and we've really benefited from that. But how long will that be maintained is unknown. But so there could be some opportunities for those kind of collaborative efforts. I would say applying to those properties that are most of value in our community.
So if we did an advertisement and pushed by Buffalo, they probably would keep it longer.
I don't know if a lot of people realize how close the Silver Lake Park came to never happening. I don't know if anybody else was on the board back then. Brent Walt came in with a drawing. Here's a subdivision. It's going in. Rex Ballantyne, we got a purchase agreement. We're going to make this a subdivision. And we made a meeting with Brent Walt and said, hey, we really would like to make that a park. And he said, okay. He lives right near there. He said, you want to make it a park? you get it appraised, you pay the appraisal price, and make it a park, I'll withdraw my proposal. No, there was nothing stopping him from putting a subdivision in there. Just the fact that he was a good citizen and saw the value of a park. So the opportunities you're talking about are there when they present themselves. I think we've done a pretty good job of taking advantage of them, but that was a close one.
Yeah. There's 80 acres out on Oak Road.
There is, sitting there.
Not the prettiest land, but
Well, just on that, how would you identify within the master plan areas that you want to buy? I mean, if I own a piece of property and it's currently zoned low density, so I can do 1 to 3 units, and all of a sudden I see it on the master plan as potential parkland in the future, I might not be very happy about that. Just because
Well-
I'm looking at it, I'm gonna get, 20,000 an acre over here, or I'm gonna get this over here. Unless, you're of a mind that you just want to do things for the community and all that. But in general, I think a lot of people look at, well, what's the value of that? And do I want that changed in a master plan so that at some future time, somebody's going to think, oh, well, you can't do that. Low density, you have to do that. That causes problems in the community too, so.
Right. Well, I don't think it would necessarily be something that would be explicit in, say, the master plan or the future land use map. I think it would be something, I think if the township wanted to consider that, I would suggest, like I said, probably developing some partnerships with some of those that are probably the entities that could help on how to, acquire properties and that type of thing. And I would see that the township would be, a partner to that, but maybe not necessarily the lead on that. And that could be a way to approach it a little bit differently, because I think that would, we're good at maybe holding, building parks and so forth like that, but acquiring these things are a little bit more complicated, like you mentioned. So I would say finding who are those allies and partners that we could work with in potentially doing something like this before we would kind of, start pushing forward.
But maybe the Parks Committee can look at and internally have a kind of a list. I mean,
We kind of do that.
Yeah, there's been.
what you'd like to see
Yep.
Yeah, there's been some of those lists, and then that raises expectations from people that, oh, you're going to buy my property, and then it's like, no. So that's where I would be. I would not suggest. I mean, there was a list, I believe, in the previous Park and Rec plan, or in a draft, or
Yeah, in the previous Parks and Rec plan, it had.
You're not on the
Oh, I should actually be on. Yeah. Yeah, I think in the previous Parks and Rec plan, there was actually a kind of list or a map of properties. This time around, the parks just recently updated the Parks and Rec plan and went with more criteria. And that also being a policy document can be used to, like, if there's an opportunity to buy something, does it make sense? Does it enhance what we have? Does it create new opportunities? I think the challenge, with the kind of list is all of a sudden, like, people might see their property on that list, or different opportunities might come up. Like, one of them, I think, became Hickory Forest. One of them is that fly ash dump site from Light and Power, and I think one of them became a development because just different opportunities kind of presented themselves. But yeah, the Parks and Rec plan is still a policy document as well, and that kind of works in tandem. One of the goals, even in the master plan, is still regularly update and use the Parks and Rec plan, so that they still tie together.
yeah, I would just add, I think one of the things we don't want to get caught in is going after properties just because we think that they're available, or, and it might not be a bad property. I would say, because of the resources involved in doing something like this, what are those ones that are most valuable and ideally would be preserved, I think is what we want to focus on. So.
You know how, John, and you guys, you did the connectors map where you kind of showed like in this region type thing? What if we did a map that's kind of a regional circled map that's like, we would be interested in green space possibly in these areas? And who knows if, Grandma Jane, when she passes away, just wants to donate her land for the green space, or, I mean, would it be wrong to create a proposed future map like we did with the connectors, that's kind of like, these are, and let the Parks Committee go through it and that, and say, you know, hey, in this area, we're kind of chunking that we would like some green space, we'd maybe like something over here, we'd maybe like something here.
In answer to that, we have done that at the Parks and Rec Committee meetings, and like John said, if we put something on a piece of paper that says, I want this possibly as a green space, then there's going to be people in the community that are not going to like that, okay? So, I mean, granted, I might be Grandma Jane and I want to do that. If you want to do that, then you put that in your will. But we're not going to put it on a map that this is the places that we're looking at. We're looking as far as the Parks Commission goes, is if something comes up and it's feasible, then we can look into it at that point in time.
Denise hits on a point. There's a lot of people in the community are really in favor of things unless they're next door to where they live.
Exactly.
Or whatever, you know.
Don't want to hear
I
ball
moved, you know,
games.
I moved here 10 years ago. I don't want any more roads because then more people will move here.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
There's way too much of that, and that's where it's really difficult. You know, we're growing and growing. People want to move here, but then the people that move here don't want anybody else to move here. And we deal with that a lot, so.
Trying to get a balance, get the infrastructure in place so we can have the places for people to live so that they can work here and we can grow, but we get out of whack quite often.
Juggling act, so. Anything else from our board? Anybody? John, are we looking good for our next agenda on the 10th? Usually we review items for the next agenda. We all set? We got enough coming up?
Yeah, you'll have the findings of fact for 3066 North Garfield, and then we're expecting, I don't know for certain yet, but we're expecting a conceptual plan for that multifamily development at the Gauthier property.
Oh, okay.
That's the one that last night the town board heard a presentation on a brownfield plan for that site. It's a 154-unit apartment complex plan there. I don't think they're quite ready to submit for a special use permit, but I've asked them, because this brownfield review process has already commenced, that I'd like to have them at least meet with the planning commission and conceptual review, just to kind of give you guys an overview and, you know, identify any issues of potential. So they'll probably provide that sketch plan for the April meeting. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda.
That's all we have.
That's it right now.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any of our town board members have anything additional they'd want to talk about?
No, I just want to say I appreciate John's leadership, you know,
Yes.
from my end, and then the planning commission. I always felt from day one when I stepped into my role that you guys are the heavy lifters, and you have a big role here, and kind of makes our job easy, I feel.
Absolutely.
So I've always been grateful, and thank you.
Thank you.
Labor of love.
Lift heavy things.
Bob, you got anything exciting?
No, sir.
Pat?
Again, I just want to echo the hard work that Steve and John do at walking us through the process with the master plan and the review. Your wisdom and how things proceeded along, just looking at basically every nuance and every aspect of it and helping to develop the plan that we have. So I just want to thank you.
I have to say, we're very lucky to have the two of you.
Yes.
For sure. Thank you. Good portal hire, huh, from the county.
Do we have any motion to adjourn?
If there are no objections, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.
Good man.